I want to come to the music here in a second and work our way up to this wonderful performance that I know that we're all going to love. But I am fascinated by something you've been teaching for a while. You've been teaching a class on practice. And I want to get into what you're telling these students in your class about practice. And I start with this because I was in a conversation some years ago with a great basketball coach. And we were talking about this adage that practice makes perfect. And he said to me, Tavis, that's not actually true. And I beat into my players that it's not that practice makes perfect, because what if you're practicing the wrong way? What he said was perfect practice makes perfect. Because you can practice all day long. If you're doing it wrong, you're not going to be perfect at what you're working on, which is an interesting way into the conversation because, again, to your class about practice, what are you teaching these young artists about what practice is, about how to go about it, how to approach it? And for obvious reasons, we all want to perfect whatever it is that we're doing. So I'm wondering if I can learn something from you about what you're teaching about practice.
Well, you know, there's a lot of information out there about about what to learn, but not enough about how to learn. And that's what this is about, because there are principles that are universal, that apply even beyond music. It's sort of the universal principles of excellence in any field that you can apply to music. And one of the things is I slow everything down. I slow everything way down. I simplify everything. I find that a lot of musicians tend to try too much too quickly. And by simplifying it, you are able to achieve perfection. And what I tell my students is it's more important to be perfect than to play anything interesting. Do something even extremely boring, but play it perfectly. And you'll find that even within 3 notes, as you repeat those 3 notes, there's a whole universe of sound in those 3 notes. You know how I got into this is there was a time when I was beginning my career and I was doing a lot of meditation. And it occurred to me that by meditating, I was in a way sort of training my mind, and that I wonder if that could somehow be applied to the music. And I realized that what meditation basically does is it simplifies your mind to where you're focusing on one thing, and you can really master that one thought. And that same thing applies to music as well.
So where do you come down on this Malcolm Gladwell notion, this Gladwellian notion that it takes 10,000 hours of practice to become really proficient, to become perfect at a particular thing?
I think it's true that it takes a lot of hours. I don't know if it's 10,000, 10,001. I don't know what the actual number is, but I do know that there are ways of dramatically accelerating that process.
And the flip side of this notion of practice, where artists are concerned, and I'm always curious about the way that artists approach life, because I think that our best ambassadors for anything in this country are really artists. I love talking to artists all the time for that reason, because I learn so much from them. But this is almost the inverse of what Miles said to his band, speaking of great jazz artists. Miles didn't want his band practicing too much because he didn't want them to get on stage and do it the way they had practiced it, because jazz at its essence is something that should never be done the same way twice.
Well, when you talk about what it is that you're practicing, I think that still fits what Miles was saying, because he wanted his band to be creative, and so he wanted them to practice being spontaneous. And so doing something by rote and playing it over and over again, that's not practicing what he wanted them to practice. So in a sense, they were practicing by not practicing.
I get it. Okay, I'll take it. So you answered that. Now, thank you. I'm always curious to learn from artists who obviously practice and perfect their craft. Tell me about this project, Friends. I know it's obviously you and a bunch of friends, but how did the concept come together where you and all your friends are featured on these 11 different tracks?
This was my dream team, some of my favorite musicians. I proposed this idea to the record label, Mac Avenue Records, and they thought it was great. I've had great artists play with me on various projects, but this was the first time that I did one where the collaborations is the concept. And so I gave them a lot of leeway as far as picking the music, and I really went out of my way to help them to feel comfortable in the musical setting and the situation. So like, for example, when I contacted Bucky Pizzarelli, and he said, well, what do you want to play? And I said, well, one song I was kind of thinking was 7 Come 11. He said, oh, that's a great idea. Well, that's from his era, you know. So it was a pretty good guess on my part, you know. Regina Carter is a very sensitive violinist. She's just so soulful. And so we did some things like the improvisation on the bar talk piece, where we gave her a chance to really savor every note. We had Christian McBride, we had Kenny Garrett, Ronnie Laws, Nicholas Payton, Charlie Hunter,
you got
so
some
many
cool
great
friends.
artists. Yeah.
Must be nice to be a friend of Stanley Jordan. So Stanley invites you to play on his album, and you can bring whatever piece of music you want to play, and y'all figure out a way to make it work.
There was a lot of joy and celebration in the studio, and I think that comes through.
It does come through. It's a wonderful tribute to you and to your friends. Was there a piece that was brought to you and you had to think twice about, ooh, I'm not really sure I can do this, or whether it fits, or whether or not there's something I can work with, or are you open to all of these at first glance?
No, I was very open to it, and by letting the artist play a big role in choosing the material, it actually kind of stretched me beyond my comfort zone, and I like that too. That's good. It's always good for us to try new things.
Yeah.